How's it going, guys? It's Jeff, and today we'll be talking about how to back up your entire computer using Rclone. So we're going to be uploading our contents to the cloud. So whichever provider you wish to use is up to you. So, for example, there's Jota Cloud or there's Google Drive or OneDrive or any of those, but the requirement is Rclone. Now, in order to get Rclone, that really depends on your package manager. But in the case of Void Linux, you just do xps install Rclone. And after doing that, you'll have this Rclone command, and there are a bunch of different options. So, you can perform checksums on files, you can copy, you can mount, and essentially all it is transparency on remotely connected drives. And that's all that Rclone really is. It gives you a lot of options to deal with files remotely. So what we're going to be doing is just backing up the root of the file system to whatever cloud provider we wish to use. However, there are a few caveats about doing this. So if we go ahead and look out here at the root directory, it's important to note that in some of the folders, like I believe it's proc and maybe sys, there exists some, I think they're like loop files, or I'm not really sure, but there are some just massively giant size files like 256 gigabytes, and you don't want to include those. So what I've go ahead and done is basically just completely ignored the proc and all of its contents. But most of these files are actually created after booting Linux, so it probably doesn't really matter. Another thing I've done is exclude mount, just in case you could have recursions and things happening if you do that, because you could have, or I shouldn't say recursions, but redundancy. And I don't know, it just doesn't really make sense to mount things that are connected, because sometimes they're not connected, sometimes they are. I don't know, but it just doesn't really seem to make sense to me. I'll kind of walk you through how to form this command. So assuming that you already have Rclone installed, basically all you want to do is run this command, rclone sync. We take the root directory, and then we take our provider. So for example, Jota Cloud, and we take the path that we want to start syncing these files. And now this is very important, as this is the way sync works is essentially saying match. We want to match the contents of root on Jota Cloud to root on our own drive, and that means that if there are files that already exist in there, they will be deleted in order to match the state of this directory. So if you actually would rather, you could use copy instead, and copy will never delete files. It will only copy the files from here over to here. So in other words, the files from root into the remote root, which is just Jota Cloud. If we go ahead and look in here, these are the files that are currently in the root Jota Cloud directory. So for example, if I wanted to, let's do a little test. So let's go ahead and move this history file, or back up this history file to our Jota Cloud. So rclone copy.history onto Jota Cloud root. And this will just copy the file on our Jota Cloud. It was not verbose, but if we go ahead and refresh the page on Jota Cloud, we can see that we now have this history file. However, it doesn't preserve things like the modified times or any of that. So we want to make sure that while we're backing up our files, that we will also back up literally everything, including the modified times and all those aspects. We kind of want it to be like more of an archival system. So in order to do that, we really need to take advantage of making things as preserved as possible. Now let's go ahead and run this command for real now. So if we say rclone copy the root directory of this file system to Jota Cloud, let's go ahead and put it in its own folder. Let's say backup for YouTube video. And as you can see, we have this command formed. And if we run it as is, there won't be any output or anything that we could observe as it's transferring these files. So a better thing would be to include the progress flag as well as the verbose flag. And we should also use the exclude flag for excluding the proc directory. So that's just exclude equals, and then the directory that we want to exclude, which is going to be let's exclude mount. Let's exclude mount as well as the proc directory. And basically these two stars basically just mean everything inside of proc and everything inside of mount. Now, I have a bunch of sane defaults as a configuration file, I guess you could say. And this is just to make sure that things are being preserved as much as possible. So I have interactive mode just so that things are never overridden without my awareness. I have it doing checksums so that there are no issues in, potentially overlapping files because, well, in some cases, for example, Rclone might see that they're the same size and the same name. Oh, so they're the same thing, but that's not really the case. So a checksum will essentially make sure that we can override files based on the actual identity of those files, what those files actually are. So it's a much better heuristic for kind of identifying what a file is, as opposed to just saying a file with said name and said size. Another thing is I have this verbose progress, and this is the important one, preserve metadata. So that preserves like permissions and things like that. I have this no update mod time, which basically says if the files are identical, then why would you even update it? And this is kind of important for preserving a timeline. If, for example, you make a copy of a video and you delete the original one for some reason, well, the timestamp has just been refreshed essentially. But the reality is that the timestamp really should not have changed because it's still the same exact content. So no update mod time just makes sure that the times don't change if the files didn't change. Why would they? Another flag I like to put is this max size equals 128 gigabytes. And this is just in case there are really giant files that shouldn't need to be backed up. And that's like system files. Those are like those loop file things that aren't really physically 128 gigabytes, but they're rather like virtually sized that much. And those do not need to be included. But of course, I would do diligence and use this flag wisely because some people may have files that big. I would do 48 transfers and 48 checkers. Otherwise, you're going to be waiting a long time for your entire system to be backed up. And other than that, it's pretty much up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and write this command. All right. We should also include fast lists because that just makes listing directories a lot faster. If we go and look at this command, we have rclone copy the root to the folder of JavaCloud backup for YouTube video. We're going to include progress, verbose, exclude the mount and proc directories, exclude files of max size at 128 gigabytes, no update mod time, and fast list. Now, if we try running this as is, we're going to get permission errors. So optionally, you can run this command as superuser if you really care about things that are outside of your home directory. But if you really need everything to be backed up, then you should run this command as root. So I'm going to run this command as root. And as you can see, you might get this error at first, and it's because there's no configuration file in the root directory. So what we got to do is just copy our configuration file from our regular user into the superuser directory. So we're going to do copy config rclone conf, and we're going to go ahead and copy that into root.config rclone.conf, and we're going to go ahead and run that. Now if we go ahead and try running this again, let's see what happens. And as you can see, it is trying to back up everything. And if we go ahead and look, we have this backup for YouTube video folder, and already we have the hierarchy of files coming in. So we have our home directory, we have Jeff in here, we have just all of these things. We have our root, and over time this is going to keep accumulating and just building the file tree. Oops, this is wrong. I'm deleting files as I'm doing this. That's probably not a good idea. But as you can see, we were able to basically back up our entire system. And if you let this run for, probably a day or two, you're going to have your entire system backed up. But yeah, that's pretty much the entire video for how to back up your Linux system. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment and I'll go ahead and answer it. Thank you very much.